Not far from where I live, tucked away into the countryside, there is a place called Rabbit Hash. I say it's a place because I don't know if it's big enough to be an incorporated town or village. It's there, but I don't know its official status. It consists of a general store. That's it. And that burned down, but people in the vicinity thought so much of it sentimentally that somehow they came up with the money to rebuild it. The only other thing I know about Rabbit Hash is that the mayor is a dog, and has been for years. I mention all of this about Rabbit Hash and their canine office holder because I've been thinking lately, in the post-truth era, about government, the general institution of government. Plato wrote about government in the Republic, but I'm not going to go back to see what he had to say. The only thing I remember about it was he said that there weren't going to be any poets in the Republic. He wasn't going to put up with any of those goddamn troublemaking poets. And then I think in the same work there was the metaphor of the cave, that humans apprehend reality only like shadows on the wall of a cave. Of course, Plato was using the thoughts of Socrates in his writings, and Socrates was put to death by his state. Consider the source, as they say. There is no good form of government. We've had governments led by gods, by people who claim they rule by divine right, and emperors, kings, tyrants, dictators, despots, and priests, and that can get nasty. Righteousness can shed a very dark light. The search is not for good government, but for one that is less bad, one that is bearable. In modern times, along with a few solo rulers, we have democracy, socialism, and communism. You can pick your poison. I think power is the problem with government, from the smallest outfits to the great nations. Governments have to have some power, some authority, or they can't function. But power leads to the ruin of all governments. De Tocqueville thought that democracy was the best of a bad lot, the only possible hope for mankind. He favored it because it had a number of stakeholders, at least in theory, plus the checks and balances built into the structure, all attempting to disperse the power. He studied democracy at work in America, and while he did find much to fault, he also confirmed his belief that it is better than any other system. I'm not certain that he'd be able to nurture that hope if he could see us now. The great experiment has just about run its course, bankrupt, stained by slavery, and the near extermination of the native race, represented in the main by lesser lights. It is a giant zombie dinosaur staggering toward its graveyard. George Orwell wrote a great deal about government. He knew a thing or two about corruption and the abuses of power, and in the end, after a lifetime of seeking some form of decent government, he had nothing good to say. He produced those two dystopian novels, Animal Farm in 1984. Both of them are bleak, and neither of them are much fun to read. I think of them as punishments. Even worse would be The Lord of the Flies, given to us by William Golding, another soured Brit. He surmised that children, left to themselves, would found a society firmly grounded in murder, idolatry, and fear, which might explain why de Tocqueville was clinging to that flickering candle of democracy. That, and he could also look back on Napoleon and before him the Reign of Terror. Things like that could make democracy look positively lustrous. Before he was beheaded, Thomas More wrote a book about a place with a good government. It was called Utopia, which means no place, which was his canny way of telling his readers that this shining haven of a smoothly functioning government did not exist, had never, and will never exist. So we try to make do with whatever form we find ourselves in, muddling along, and for us that is democracy. It is a mess. It is really sickening and depressing to see it at work, to see so many people working so diligently at cross purposes and to so little effect. And I think you have to say ultimately, yes, regretfully, amazingly, sadly, that this is the best we were able to do. Unless, possibly, Rabbit Hash has a better model.